We all know that feeling of heartbreak, right? Like you keep physically hurt,
Yeah, exactly.
But have you ever stopped to think, like, why does a broken heart actually feel like physical pain?
Hmm.
Well, today we're going deep into the fascinating world of the social brain.
Oh, cool.
We're going to be looking at Matthew Lieberman's book, Social, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. And trust me, when you understand this connection between our social lives and our brain activity, it can change everything.
I bet.
Relationships, workplaces, even how you see human nature in general.
That's a lot.
It really is. So, let's just jump right in. We always talk about this metaphor of a broken heart,
Mm.
but are our brains actually processing social pain in the same way that they process, like, physical pain?
It's funny you should ask that because it really isn't just a metaphor.
Really?
Yeah, our brains process them in surprisingly similar ways.
Wow.
Like, researchers have found that the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the DACC,
Right.
it's a region of the brain, and it's associated with physical pain.
Oh.
But, and this is the interesting part, it also lights up when we experience social pain.
So my brain basically can't tell the difference between, like, stubbing my toe and a really bad breakup.
Well, it's a little more complicated than that.
Okay.
But there's some interesting research out there. Have you ever heard of that cyberball experiment?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Isn't that where people play this, like, virtual ball toss game?
Right.
And then, like, all of a sudden they're excluded?
Exactly. And guess what they found? That same DACC activity, getting left out of the game, triggered it.
No way.
Yeah. It's like, even though it's just a game, our brains are still reacting as if it's a real social threat.
Wow.
And Lieberman talks about how this makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, too.
Like back in the caveman days.
Exactly. Like, imagine you're an early human
Okay.
and you get ostracized from the group.
Uh-oh. Not good.
No, definitely not good. It could be life or death.
Right. No more food, shelter, or protection.
Yeah. Og hun.
So basically, our brains evolved to treat social rejection like a big flashing warning sign.
Exactly. Like, hey, get back in the good graces of the tribe or you're toast.
That need for connection is, like, literally woven into our neural circuitry.
Oh, really?
It's not just some fluffy feel-good concept. It's like survival.
Exactly.
So if our brains are so sensitive to social pain, does that also mean they're wired to seek out, like, specific social rewards?
Oh, absolutely. Like, just as we're hardwired to avoid pain, we're also driven to seek out pleasure.
Right.
And social pleasure is a big part of that.
Okay, so what kind of things trigger those feel-good vibes in our brains, socially speaking?
Well, think about how you feel when someone treats you fairly
Mm.
or when someone shows you kindness and, like, they really get you.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting a pat on the back, It's more than that.
Yeah, it's like feeling seen and respected and valued.
Exactly. And it goes deep. Like, there was this one study where they had people play a game.
Okay.
And in this game, they could be treated fairly or unfairly by another player.
Gotcha.
And when they were treated fairly,
Yeah.
their brains lit up in a specific area.
Which one?
The ventral striatum. It's a key part of the reward system.
So that's the same area that gets activated when we win a prize or eat a delicious meal.
Exactly.
So my brain basically sees fairness as a reward.
It seems that way. It's like our brains are wired to crave it.
But here's the thing. We always hear that humans are inherently selfish.
Right.
So if our brains are so wired for fairness, why does it seem like so often self-interest wins out?
That is the question, isn't it?
I mean, the world is not exactly a utopia of fairness and cooperation, right?
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting, and we're going to dive into that in the next part of our deep dive, looking at the complexities of cooperation and altruism.
Oh, I can't wait. So we talked about how our brains just love fairness. Like, it literally lights up those reward centers. But what about, cooperation?
Right.
We always hear about this whole survival of the fittest thing, like humans are just inherently selfish, right?
Right.
Does Lieberman address that at all in his book?
Oh, he does.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting because some of those traditional ideas about, like, human behavior, they kind of start to unravel.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Well, we've been talking about the DACC, right?
Yeah.
And the pain of social rejection. But what about the flip side of that? Like, what motivates us to connect with each other, to cooperate, even when it might not, like, directly benefit us in the moment?
Yeah, that's a good point. It would make sense if we, like, only cooperated when it was, good for us. But is that really all there is to it?
Well, not necessarily. And, there's this really interesting scenario in game theory.
Mhm.
It's called the prisoner's dilemma.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's like a classic example of how cooperation can actually be a better strategy,
Oh,
even if it means you might get a slightly smaller reward for yourself.
huh. Okay, I think I remember learning about the prisoner's dilemma like years ago in a psychology class.
Yeah.
Can you maybe give me a quick refresher?
Of course. So basically, in the prisoner's dilemma, you have two people.
Right.
They get accused of a crime.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. They're held separately, and they're each given a choice. They can either confess, which means betraying the other person, or they can stay silent and hope the other person does the same.
Okay, so it's kind of a gamble.
Right. Because the outcome, like what happens to each person, depends on what the other person chooses.
Gotcha. So, like, if I stay silent, I'm risking a longer sentence if the other person confesses,
Well,
right?
exactly.
But if we both stay silent, we both get off a little easier.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that studies have actually shown that when people cooperate in the prisoner's dilemma, they choose to stay silent together.
Yeah.
Their brains actually show activity in the reward system, even if it means they personally get a slightly smaller payoff.
So our brains actually, like, enjoy working together,
It seems that way.
even when it's not, necessarily in our own best interest, at least on the surface.
Yeah. It really challenges that idea that we're all just completely driven by self-interest,
Yeah.
It suggests that cooperation might be something more. Like, it's not just a behavior that we learn. It might actually be built into our biology.
Huh. That's pretty amazing. So it's not just about fairness then, right? It's
Right.
about, like, the reward of working together towards a shared goal.
Exactly. And this kind of brings us to another fascinating piece of the puzzle, which is altruism.
Oh, altruism. Okay.
Yeah. Those acts of kindness where there's really no expectation of any personal benefit at all,
Yeah.
purely selfless acts.
Altruism has always kind of seemed like, I don't know, a mystery to me. Like, why would we ever do something that doesn't benefit us in any way?
Yeah.
Is there a scientific explanation for that?
There might be, yeah. And this is where oxytocin comes in.
Oh, okay. Oxytocin. Yeah, I've heard of that. It's the love hormone, right?
That's right. It helps mothers bond with their babies.
Yeah.
But, it turns out that oxytocin plays a much bigger role than just that.
Really?
Yeah, research suggests that oxytocin might actually be involved in, promoting generosity and pro-social behavior,
Interesting.
even towards strangers.
Really? So, like, if I get a little squirt of oxytocin,
Yeah.
that'll turn me into a do-gooder.
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Oh, no.
But there have been studies where, researchers have administered oxytocin,
Mm-hmm.
and it led to the participants actually being more generous in, like, economic games and stuff, even when it meant that they might end up, getting less money for themselves.
Wow. So we actually have, like, a biological predisposition to be altruistic.
It seems that way.
Huh. I always thought of altruism as more of a, a cultural or moral thing.
It's probably a combination of both, honestly. But the research on oxytocin definitely suggests that there's, like, a biological basis for that urge to care for other people, to help them, even when there's nothing, directly in it for us.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so our brains are wired for connection. We love fairness. We even have a hormone that, like, nudges us towards altruism.
Yeah.
But, like, why doesn't it feel like that's the dominant narrative? Like, why do we still see so much conflict and division in the world?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Like, if we're so hardwired for connection, why aren't we all, holding hands and singing Kumbaya?
Yeah.
It's something that Lieberman grapples with in his book, too.
Yeah, it's almost like there's this disconnect
Mm.
between what the research is telling us about our social brains and then, like, how we actually behave out in the world.
Right.
Why is it so hard to, like, tap into that inherent goodness that we're talking about?
Well, Lieberman thinks it might have to do with how our brains categorize information. Like, we're wired to make sense of the world by, sorting things into groups. And that includes people.
Yeah, we naturally form groups based on shared interests, belief, backgrounds, all of that.
Right.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
We feel connected to people who are similar to us.
Exactly. Like, that group membership, it gives us a sense of belonging. It gives us an identity.
Yeah.
Helps us navigate the social world.
Right.
But, and here's the thing, our brains tend to prioritize our own in-group over the out-groups.
Oh, so it's like that whole us versus them mentality.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it explains a lot, like, tribalism, prejudice, even when those distinctions are based on like really arbitrary things.
Yeah, and it's not even always like a conscious thing, is it? Like, it's not that we're all just trying to be mean.
Right, it's often unconscious.
Unconscious bias.
Yeah, and it shapes how we see the world, how we behave.
Okay, that makes sense, but it also feels kind of like disheartening.
Yeah.
If we're so prone to like dividing ourselves up into us and them, is there any hope for us?
Well, Lieberman thinks there is.
Okay, good.
He says the key is to recognize that those boundaries that we've created, those group boundaries, they're often really arbitrary and fluid. Like what makes someone part of our in-group, it can change depending on the situation.
So instead of like fixating on our differences, we should try to look for common ground,
Exactly.
those shared experiences and values that connect us.
Yes. And this is where empathy comes in.
Oh, okay, empathy.
That ability to like step outside of ourselves and really try to understand other people's experiences, even if they seem different from us. That's how we can start to bridge those divides.
Empathy, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds so simple.
It does.
But it's probably like one of the hardest things for humans to actually do,
Yeah, it's not easy.
especially in a world that feels, so polarized these days.
It's a skill, though, something we can practice.
Okay.
And research shows it's worth the effort.
Really?
Yeah, empathy's been linked to all sorts of positive things.
Yeah.
Increased cooperation, altruism, less prejudice, less conflict.
Wow. So by strengthening our empathy muscles, we can actually rewire our brains to be more inclusive, more compassionate. It's like we can actually like override those old tribal instincts.
In a way, yeah, we're not just like stuck with the way we're wired.
Yeah,
We have the power to choose how we want to connect with others.
that's really powerful. And this whole idea that our brains are wired for connection, for fairness, even for altruism, that's pretty hopeful, don't you think?
I do. I think it gives us a reason to believe that we can create a better world,
Yeah,
a kinder world, a more compassionate world, even if it's just like one interaction at a time.
one empathetic interaction at a time. I like that. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the social brain. And, remember what we talked about today? Like, the next time you feel that pang of heartbreak, that's actually a reminder of just how deeply you are wired for connection.
That's a great way to put it.
So go out there and connect. Thanks for listening.